cold, the snow and rain and comment.
Reminds me of my childhood, which I loved, the snow.
We want to thank you for coming because this meeting is intended as a public information meeting. We want your thoughts this morning. So again, due to the weather and everything, we appreciate that you're here. Thank you. First thing I'd like to do is ask the commission to introduce itself, starting on my far left.
Alan Weiner, City Planner. Robert Flanagan, Assistant City Planner.
Robert Lawrence, alternate.
All right.
Gary Lawton, alternate.
Jody Sills-Gagney, alternate.
Marie Keaton, Commissioner.
And I'm John Shore, Vice Chairman. Again, thanks for coming. And I'd like to turn this meeting over to our consultant, Mr. Cholder. This meeting is intended entirely, as much as possible, to show thoughts. We're going through this process for some months now of updating our plan of conservation and development. And this is one of the meetings that you're going to get a chance to give us some needed input about the City of Bristol. So, Glenn.
Great. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
You guys are so chipper and cheerful. Let me see if I can put you to sleep on a Saturday morning with the PowerPoint presentation. My name is Glenn Cholder. I'm with a firm called Planometrics, and we've had the pleasure of here working with the Commission on preparing a draft plan of conservation and development for Bristol. I put together a PowerPoint because the plan itself is actually quite comprehensive and thorough, but to give everybody an overview of all of the things that are in the plan and actually set the stage for discussion and comments later. So allow me, if you will, to kind of go through the PowerPoint. The cover of the plan is actually an image from the 1920 plan that was done for Bristol, Connecticut. And that's kind of significant for a couple of reasons. First of which, back in 1920, city plans were not all that common, so Bristol was quite forward-thinking in terms of having a plan done at that time to look at how the city was growing and changing. And really this kind of sets the stage, if you will, for forward-thinking about the city and the things that we can or should be working on to make the city a better place in the future. And the second reason it's on the cover at this point is that during the time of this plan, and each plan generally has about a 10-year life, we're going to be looking out on things that we can accomplish in the next 10 years. It will be the centennial of this document. So for that reason, we again chose to make the plan cover the image from this 1920 plan for the city. Let me give you an overview of what a plan of conservation and development is all about and the reason for its creation. A plan is not a set of regulations that indicates what has to be done by who. It's really an advisory document that's meant to point out things that will be good for the city. So just like having a square meal and adhering to a diet and all the other stuff, the plan is really a guide for the things that we should be thinking about. And it causes us or forces us to ask ourselves the question, what kind of community do we want to be in the future? Are the current policies that the city has getting us there? Or in fact, are we actually kind of working against each other in some places? How can we be more efficient or consistent? And overall, how do we make Bristol a better place in the future? So the process to date is that there is a 2000 plan of conservation and development. Working with the Commission, we've gone through that plan. We've identified and talked about some different strategies. We've gotten community input. We did a telephone survey of residents to get feedback from them. For people who weren't so intrepid to show up at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, thanks again for that. We prepared a draft plan. The Commission has reviewed it. And our purpose, again, is to get additional thoughts and comments as we move ahead towards adoption. The community input, again, included a kickoff meeting back in June, I think, of last year. Again, multiple meetings with the Planning Commissions, all of which have been open to the public, telephone survey, and the workshop meeting overall. So now I'd like to give you an overview of actually what's in the plan itself. The plan is broken up into sort of 5 main pieces. The very first part is we set the stage for things that are affecting Bristol today. So this is the planning context portion, the things that are on our mind as we start to prepare a plan. Then there's 3 thematic areas of the plan. The conservation strategies are things that Bristol may want to preserve or protect as we go towards the future, things that are important to us in terms of our DNA as a community. Development strategies is about how we want to guide growth and change in the future, because change is going to happen to us. It's happened to us historically. It's going to happen to us again. How do we want to approach that in the future? And then the third part is the infrastructure strategies, and this has to do with services or facilities as a community we'd like to have available for our quality of life, et cetera. And then a conclusion at the end talks about how the plan, in fact, can be implemented. So some of the context things are actually kind of interesting and important. Bristol's population growth since the very first census in 1790 grew quite significantly because of the industriousness of our community in terms of our contribution to the world economy. Our population grew quite significantly, but really since about 1970, 1980, population growth has flattened. We're actually at a kind of a flex point here right now that depending on how we look at the future, our population could go up, stay steady, or decline. So this is actually kind of a significant time for us to be planning. I've prepared some charts here to kind of show you how our age composition is changing over time. Now what this chart shows is different age groups, 5-year age groups from 0 all the way out to age 85. And the height of these bars represents the number of people in different age groups. Everybody with me? So what this chart shows is the change that occurred in Bristol in a decade. So in the 1970s, we had this many people born in Bristol. These are people who were here 10 years earlier who were here then. So that's what the tan color represents. Green represents net in-migration. These age groups are bigger than before. And the white caps, if you will, on some of these represents people that left Bristol. So the age group is smaller after the decade than we would have expected. You with me? So what's interesting about this is the growth in Bristol has tended to come from births, right? These are brand new people coming to our community, right? They weren't here 10 years earlier. And the second thing is with net in-migration of younger adults moving to Bristol. So if we look at this during the 1970s, who in here was, by the way, was born between 1945 and 1965? You are a baby boomer, okay? And you will see yourself reflected in this chart, and you can think about you and your life in terms of what has happened. But the baby boomers here were just around the 20 to 25-year age group, so renters possibly. As we go to the change in the 1980s, what we have here again is population growth due to births, net in-migration of baby boomers, out-migration of some of the other age groups. In the 90s, similar pattern, and what happened in the last 10 years. So I'm going to roll through those again just for a moment here, and I want you to keep track of what happens with the baby boomers. Okay? See that? We're getting to be an older community dominated by the baby boomers. Now what happens as the baby boomers get older? Okay? Household sizes get smaller. Kids move out, we're living by ourselves, sometimes we're single, smaller households. So as a result, Bristol's dynamics in the future are going to be affected by some of these changing age composition things, and I want you to keep that in mind. Our age composition is expected to change, and in fact, the age group, which is 60 and over, is expected to grow because of the baby boomers to the future and then start to decline again. So our age composition in the future is going to be different than it is in the past. This is important for us to think about. We have a diverse housing stock. Our economy has changed over the years. If you look at 1960, we had about 10,000 manufacturing jobs. By the year 2000, it was down to about 3,000. And the corollary is we had about 3,000 service jobs in 1960, and up to about 14,000 service jobs in 2010. So our economy and the types of jobs in Bristol have changed, but the region has changed and the state has changed during that same period. But these are some of the things that are affecting us overall and set the stage for some of the recommendations in the plan. So as I indicated, one of the key themes of the plan is conservation strategies. One of the first chapters in the plan is the recommendations to protect natural resources. Throughout the plan are a number of maps which are meant to illustrate and identify where some of the important resources in town are. And on this map, we're showing the important water resources, wetlands, floodplains, steep slopes, aquifer protection areas, etc. And again, the plan recommends protecting water resources and protecting other natural resources in the community. And from the telephone survey, 74% of residents felt that Bristol was doing a good job in this area and that we should continue these efforts. Plan recommends preserving open space. We have existing open spaces in town, in the city, owned by the city, the various water departments. The state owns property in town. Plan recommends we maintain existing open spaces and acquire new open spaces as opportunities arise, and try to interconnect open spaces, again, as opportunities arise. 60% of residents felt that Bristol should try to acquire more land for open space and parks in the future. Community character is a section of the plan as well. It actually weaves through many of the different chapters in the plan, but Bristol still has farms and farming areas. The plan recommends that those be preserved, that areas such as South Mountain with undeveloped land, that we should try to preserve that in an undeveloped state if we can. Number of historic resources in town, in the city, and those should also be preserved. Important community resources. We recognize that we have a lot of cultural facilities in Bristol, and the plan talks about cultural facilities in the normal sense, and also some pop culture facilities that we have, which make us unique and should be protected and preserved in the future. 87% of residents felt that Bristol should encourage more public events and other activities to celebrate these types of things and help build our community character and tie us together, our social fabric together, if you will. Plan recommends that we continue the efforts in terms of property maintenance and also look at ways to guide and manage community design. 76% of residents felt that Bristol should have a say as to what the outside of new commercial and industrial buildings look like. Yet we really don't have strong procedures in place at the present time, so the plan recommends that we consider doing something in that regard. There's a new chapter in the plan, which is different from before. The plan recommends that we promote sustainability. How can Bristol be a greener community in the future in terms of energy conservation, water conservation? And this doesn't just mean the city government itself, but all residents, etc. How can we try to ensure a greener future for ourselves? And then also the issue of resiliency, which is in terms of the changing climate and other things going on, how can we be sure we're ready to respond quickly to situations that come up, such as this February and all the snow we've had, and what do we do with it, where do we put it, etc. The next major section of the plan is related to development strategies. The plan identifies key principles for the downtown area. Now, really over the last months, years, there have been quite a bit of discussion about a specific site in the downtown. The plan doesn't focus on a specific site. It focuses really on the entire downtown area and how we can try to make downtown a thriving and vibrant part of the community and its future. It's important to us. It's the heart of our community. How can we make this a better place in the future? 90% of residents in the survey felt that Bristol should continue efforts to encourage the revitalization of downtown, and the plan outlines those sort of key principles. And some of those principles are to create a focal point there for the community, promote mixed uses, increase the activities and events that happen there, address parking. It's very important in the downtown area that parking work well, promote public spaces and ensure appropriate design. And those principles can be used to review specific development proposals in the downtown area, but the plan doesn't get involved in the nitty-gritty of individual developments themselves. There's also a section in the plan about promoting business development. As part of the survey results, we asked people for different types of businesses, whether they felt they were too many, too few, or just about right in terms of these business uses in the community. And so the plan talks about trying to expand the business tax base, meet the needs that the people have identified in the community overall, provide employment, goods and services, and tax base for the community to help us be a successful community. The plan identifies through it, the map, how to manage the business development areas. The different colored areas on here represent commercial zones, industrial zones. We have an enterprise zone, and to promote the development of these areas to meet these business development goals. The plan recommends that we look at these zones, locations, and the regulatory criteria to make sure we have good provisions in place. Particularly review the parking requirements. I remember reading not too long ago in the Wall Street Journal that for every car in America, there are 7 parking spaces. So, what are you guys doing with the other 6 right now? But the problem we have from a development perspective is when we dedicate site to pavement, we can't dedicate it to building or landscaping. And so as a city, what we may end up doing by over-providing parking is actually hurting ourselves in terms of our ability to promote a sustainable, livable community and economic development. So the plan recommends that we make sure that our standards are good. I'm not saying they're terrible, but maybe we could make them better. Now, most of the city, I think it's 86% of the city, is zoned for residential development, right? Who here lives in a residential area, right? Okay, there you go. So the plan recommends we preserve and enhance the integrity and stability of residential neighborhoods. The reason people live here and choose to live here is because of the house, the community, and all the other things. So preserving and enhancing the integrity and stability of neighborhoods is a key recommendation. The plan recommends that we look at guiding multifamily design and proposals where they occur, and encouraging diversification of the housing stock to meet the housing needs of the future. Now, you may recall earlier on I said we have a diverse housing stock. So you may be saying to yourself, what is he talking about? But also recall what I talked about was the changing demographics and the changing age composition of the community. So I happen to live, again, in a single-family house. We've recently become empty nesters, so my wife and I are kind of scratching our heads thinking, why are we living here again? So we're starting to think about housing options and housing choices. And so some of the opportunities that exist for Bristol is because of the diversity of uses and situations that we have in the city, that we can actually make ourselves more attractive, more desirable to an aging population, which hasn't been part of our DNA, right? Who have we typically attracted? Younger families looking for their first housing. If we can keep those people in the community, that becomes population growth and economic growth for the city, and it's something for us to think about for the future. Bristol's not one color. It's multiple areas, neighborhoods in the community. The plan recognizes that. So it talks about specific and unique situations in Forestville, the West End, Route 6, Route 72, other issues related to institutional development, and makes specific recommendations or highlights work that's already been done in the city in terms of special studies of these areas as part of our programs for the future. The third major thematic element of the plan has to do with infrastructure strategies. The plan talks about addressing community facility needs. The city did a space needs study. That work has happened, identified some of these needs. The plan recommends a comprehensive process for addressing community facility needs and maintaining the buildings and facilities that we have. 90% of residents felt that our libraries are adequate, 67% of residents felt that the recreational facilities are adequate, and 55% felt the senior services are adequate. But that result, 27% of the population was unsure because they don't use the facilities, so they weren't real clear. But again, the plan recommends addressing our community facility needs. Issues that came out of the space needs study related to City Hall, police, fire, and public works were identified in the plan for additional consideration. In terms of transportation needs, there's multiple elements to our transportation system in the city. The plan recommends that we maintain and enhance the roadway system, identify problem areas, promote what's called access management. Access management is the way that along the roadways, oftentimes the biggest traffic problem is left turns. Somebody stops in the middle of the roadway because they want to go left, blinkers on, and they hold up all the traffic behind them. People trying to get out of a driveway want to turn left and cross lanes. So access management is ways to try to manage the number of driveways and their locations to make the roads as efficient as possible. We have, in the city, considerable investment in our road system. It's very unlikely we're going to be able to build a lot of new roads in the future. So we have to try to figure out how to make the best use of the roads we've got, and access management is one way to do that. And so the plan recommends, particularly in business areas, which is where the problem tends to arise, that we look at that. And pavement management is just an investment philosophy that tries to maintain our roads as cost efficiently as possible, and again, the plan recommends that. There's a section in the plan about promoting pedestrian access. These red lines on this map indicate areas where we do have sidewalks today. So you can see we have a good sidewalk network in the city. The green areas on this map identify areas that are close to desirable destinations. Schools, business areas, or they may generate traffic, multifamily, but areas that should be a priority for us to try to infill our sidewalk network to make our network even stronger. And the red areas on the map are the areas which are lower density areas that might be a little bit more challenging to make a meaningful sidewalk network, but we might want to look at these areas, particularly along the main roads, to make that better. There's also a section in the plan that talks about an overall bicycle system. That bicycling is becoming both a bigger recreational activity. People are actually commuting. I saw a guy this week in the weather commuting on a bicycle. How can we do that, or how can we make provision for this in the city in the future? And the plan suggests possible bike routing. 82% of residents felt that Bristol should do more to create a better pedestrian circulation system, and 82% also felt that we should do more to create a better bicycle circulation system. Transportation needs. The plan recommends that we try and find ways to enhance bus transit and rail service. Bus service in Bristol is going to get better, I think, because of the fast track system, but right now the bus routes in the city highlight Route 6 and Route 72, but sometimes the bus takes side routes, if you will, so that if you really wanted to use the bus to get to someplace, your ability to get back may be compromised by the fact that the bike or the bus at the time that you want to take it doesn't go where you want to go. So we have a challenge here in Bristol to try to make a better bus transit system. In a community of 60,000 people that's as interconnected as we are in the region, it's an opportunity for us, but it's not really set up perhaps as well as it could be. 72% of residents felt that we should seek ways to increase transit services in the community. Bristol benefits from great piped utilities, water, sewer, natural gas. The plan advocates for drainage approaches, low-impact development, and other things like that that will treat rainwater better so we can address some of the flooding issues which are problems in certain areas of the community. It talks about wired utilities, both in terms of electricity and cable and internet, trying to become a more wired community with better service. And the plan also suggests that we start adding wireless services to our thoughts about what makes the city a better place. And these, again, are recommendations in the plan. Conclusions overall. There is a future land use plan in the back of the plan which identifies what we consider to be the sort of the desirable land uses in different areas of the city to guide the Planning Commission and the Zoning Commission in their future work. We've compared the city's plan to the state plan and the regional plan. They are generally consistent in terms of their recommendations for conservation, development, and infrastructure, and that enhances the city's ability to get grants, etc. in the future. And in terms of implementation, the plan recommends that we seek to implement the policies and the action steps or tasks in the plan. Consider a plan implementation committee. This would be a group, informal, made up of members of different boards and commissions to try to break down barriers that sometimes arise and get everybody working together so we can have more ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings, and other things like that to accomplish important projects in the city overall. So that's the overview of the Plan of Conservation Development. I think I kind of went through all the different chapters of the plan. Thank you for listening. About to open it up for public comment. Just a couple of quick ground rules here. It's an open discussion on the plan, so it's not things that have happened, historically in the past, but what we can do for the city in the future. John is our very capable moderator, so if you have a comment to make, raise your hand. John will recognize you. Please stand up. That way I know that I can hear you and other people in the room will be able to hear you as well. Whoops. Speak loudly enough so everybody can hear you. Direct your comments to the commission. The plan is the commission's plan for the future of the community. So if you're going to have influence and make change happen, you've got to convince them that it's a good idea, and please respect the opinions of others. So with that, thank you very much. And
The gentleman mentioned many surveys. I'm curious, how big a survey?
Name?
James Levins. How big a sampling did you take? Was it 60,000 people? Did you take 1,000 people, 2,000 people? And was it spread across all different ages?
Great question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, where are the property owners?
The survey was conducted, I'm trying to remember, it was October, I believe, of last year. The survey sample size was 400 households. We divided the city up into neighborhoods, and we mirrored the age composition of the community so that we made sure, if you will, that we covered different geographies, etc. 400 sample size in a community of 60,000 people gives you a margin of error on the survey results. And the margin of error on the survey results is plus or minus 3.5%. What that means is, if you may recall, there was some survey results I responded that 72% of respondents to the survey felt this. If we were, based on survey methodology, able to sample all 60,000 people or 25,000 households in Bristol, it's likely, according to the survey results, that the actual response would have been somewhere between about 69% and 75%. So it's possible using a survey to get a really good sense of what's going on in the community from that type of sample size. And just keep the margin of error in the back of your mind. If it shows up 82% felt this way, you can pretty sure that there's a strong sentiment in the community. If it comes down to 55%, 52%, you know, there's margin of error that might not make that a preponderance of evidence.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a great question.
I have a follow-up to Mr. Levin's question.
And,
Are you the moderator?
They're going to police the room, not me.
Thank you.
Ellen Sacco, 58 Merriman Street. Concerning the demographics issue with the survey, do you know if it was mostly dealing with households within your quadrants, and did you use specifically landlines? Because a lot of the younger demographic no longer has landlines, and I'm concerned that there might have been a skewing away from my non-baby boomer demographic in terms of what we feel is important in terms of investment in the community.
Great question. The survey sample was based both on landlines and cell phones. So the survey company, the survey was done by a firm out of Cromwell called Great Blue Research. Great Blue Research, this is what they do, which is why we retained them to do this work for us. So we prepared the survey questions with the commission and made sure through their efforts that we got broad representation. And again, we made sure that we got the representation in the different age groups. So we didn't sample anybody below the age of 20. Okay? But our targets were to try to get representation on renter versus owner and all of the different age groups and all the different parts of the city to try to make sure that the city could rely on these survey results in terms of thinking about public policy. It's very hard to ask 60,000 people, what do you want to do? Or how many people show up in an election or a referendum? And how many people will show up on a Saturday morning to participate in a meeting like this? But the survey reaches out to people and says, hey, you got a couple of minutes? We want to ask you questions about your community. And that's where I think the survey result was an excellent part of this plan, because even though it's only October 2014, the results are likely to be enduring and I think, again, help the city. So, another great question.
Anybody else?
Marguerite Peterson, 83 Anderson Avenue. I have three different things: a compliment, comment on Forestville, and a comment on Route 6. The first compliment is, phenomenal job on this report. It was easy to read. I wanted to read it because the graphics were there that, you know, held me in. I could glance at it and still get an idea of what was going on because of the bullets and the format. I could, you know, look at it and get little nuggets. It's consistent through each one of the things. So really, really nicely done. And the last chapter of, you know, hey, this is great, but we have to implement it and that kind of thing. Fantastic. Just really nice job. Very nice. The second thing has to do with Forestville parking. I've lived in Forestville for 10 years, and I think it took me 7 years before I realized that there's parking behind that 150, the corner store there by Nucci's, because at that corner, I'm looking at traffic and saying, if there's somebody just around that corner, I'm going to stop here if there's a red light so I don't get tail-ended and this kind of thing. And that there's parking all behind the old post office and stuff like that. And I've told every owner of those places, I said, just get one of those neat little hand-carved signs that says parking for every single driveway that's there. Because if I go through and like the next 2 seconds past that light, I go, oh, I don't stop. I can't. I live walking distance 2 blocks away from that area. And I always go past the car.
That's a great
I just don't, because it's like my life is in my hands, just trying to make sure my car doesn't get beamed going through there. So parking on the streets would be great also, you know, because people can see it, that kind of thing. But just signage. That's all. Just signage. You don't have to change a damn thing, you know. Route 6. I agree with traveling eastbound from like Chunky Tomatoes and when you know, that Carroll Street by that area of Staples and that kind of thing. I was looking at the Google map and I noticed that if I take the other side of the street going west, all the way from like Walmart and whatnot, consistently you do have 2 lanes that are traveled, and then you know, a turn lane to the right or left is added. But going east from, let's say, Staples and whatnot, it's all over the place. You're in one, it's a travel lane, all of a sudden it disappears, but then it appears again because now it's a right-hand lane and this kind of thing. But I was looking to see what would be affected, and there's a lot of little single-family homes. The map says like Brighton to Stafford Avenue, and I know that a lot of them are abandoned, and gosh, it would be fantastic to widen the street there, but I'm a homeowner, and I hate eminent domain, and I don't know how to work that out. And I know down in Florida, they have these great wide center turning lanes that if you need it, you pull into it and turn, but they also don't have as many curve cuts, you know. So if somebody pulls in, you don't have somebody like facing you and now there's a, you know, a match as to who's going to be able to turn, kind of thing. And I do appreciate if there's sidewalks on Route 6, because in the summertime I like to jog and all of a sudden I get to an area and there's no sidewalk and, you know, I got to cross the street or something of that nature, and it would be really nice on a busy street like that. It would encourage me to park in one area, get my exercise, and, you know, go shopping down the street, walk and walk back. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
No.
I just said that because you had it up.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Thanks, okay. Thanks, Liz. Craig Miner, 88 Anderson Avenue. The connection between land use and public health is better known today than it has in decades past, and so many plans of development today are being written with more understanding and awareness of the connection. For example, childhood obesity can probably be linked to the fact that there aren't as many sidewalks as there used to be. When I was a kid, there was a sidewalk in my neighborhood. There's no sidewalk in my neighborhood today. My daughter did not grow up with a sidewalk, so she wasn't able to walk safely. She wasn't able to ride her bike safely. Bike safety in general is also an issue that I think Glenn touched on, but nowadays people talk about complete streets where there's a bike lane. Now maybe Bristol, maybe we're not really ready for a bike lane the way San Francisco is, but I would like to see a little bit more of that. The park, the early presentation, the park connections you mentioned was a goal, but will the plan mention how we want to try to connect our parks better than they currently are? The downtown snapshot, I noticed there were about 6 or 7 different qualities that were desirable, but walkability wasn't listed as one of them. And most towns identify walkability as something very desirable. Now, it may be in the text somewhere, but I would have thought that would have been a bullet. And then just a final question, is the phrase or the word sustainability developed in your report somewhere? Because that's a term that people throw out. I like the Brandon Commission definition myself, but if you don't define it, then it's just a buzzword. So I would suggest that you have some definition of sustainability. Thank you.
I think at the beginning of the sustainability and resiliency chapter, the first paragraph says, in this plan, sustainability means this, resiliency means that. And because I think, again, these are terms which are bandied around these days, but people don't always agree on. So we did take a stab at that, and I hope that those definitions work for Bristol.
What's the word? I didn't get the word.
Sustainability. And what does sustainable mean for a community? What does resilient mean for a community? And those are defined at the beginning of that chapter.
apologize to the commission. This is my first time attending one of these meetings. I'm a former educator in Bristol. I'm living in Bristol. I'm building a house in Bristol. So, Elizabeth Phelan. Thank you. And so I am vested in this community, but I have not done my homework, and I apologize for that. This is my first time seeing the presentation. And again, I reflect your sentiments. I think it's very well done. I'm here out of fear because of the rumors that are abounding in town. Okay? I know for a fact that there are a lot of people who own property in town who are letting their property go down the drain, who are not even paying their water bill, which I am a partial to. You know, we don't want, the fear in this town is, the circulating rumors are, that what's going to happen is our downtown is going to become another low housing development. That we are going to be attracting people that, you know, instead of adding to the character of the community, are going to be a drain to our community resources. People are people. I believe in the goodness of people. But I also want to see something. I remember Bristol as a kid. Downtown. Places to go. It was a neat place. The buildings, the architecture. I did an art project on the former post office. Bristol needs a plan. And I'm hoping what you're presenting is going to be a plan that is going to give us a design that the people who are living here, who want to die here, are going to be proud of. Because some of the ugliest buildings I've seen in Connecticut are here in town. Anybody disagree with that one? The word style does not appear as part of this building design. So what I am hoping is that you understand that people who live here, who are committed here, who really care for this community and are out here this morning, really hope that nothing will be done in haste, that we just won't develop this land and get something on it, that we will give some really good thought and consideration to what's going on. And I will have to look over the plan, and I do apologize, but I was impressed by what I saw. Thank you.
Just real quick, I think it's important for us to remember that downtown has really evolved a lot over the years, and Bristol has changed a lot over the years. There was a time in our country where the love affair with the automobile dictated so much of what we did, that it was hipper and cooler to shop on Route 6 than it was downtown. There's a wonderful video available on YouTube that shows Bristol back in the 50s. It's remarkable to see the number of people on the streets and the stores, the activity and everything else. So it became hipper cool. We could save a quarter on paper towels by going to the strip rather than buying things downtown. So we did it to ourselves in terms of downtown. Redevelopment was considered to be hipper cool. We took buildings down to put new buildings up. So I think your lesson here is, let's try to do things in the future to make downtown a better place. And I think the plan guides that in terms of the principles and things we want to accomplish. Exactly how it's going to happen, we're not quite sure how it's going to happen, but try to encourage downtown. I believe personally and professionally that there's a huge opportunity for downtown. The changing demographics of the world as a whole are coming back in ways that are going to make downtown a happening place. We just have to be there to capture it. And I think a rising tide will do an awful lot to float a lot of boats in the downtown area. So I think the next 10 or 20 years are critical for us to actually make sure that we attract people who are empty nesters, who are elderly, but the opportunities in the downtown area, culturally and otherwise, is an opportunity for us and something for us to think about. And the plan, again, suggests that we work on this and invest in it in the future.
I think some of my main concerns over the years, I've been a Bristol resident all my life, is looking into buying a lot of the areas of open plain and flood space, best utilizing some of these areas to beautify the areas like you're saying, walking trails and things in the forestal area. There's some really nice areas, walk-ins that you could come from Frederick Street area and walk all the way down to by New Cheese and down the downtown area. These areas are important also to handle the water that comes off of all the city streets that goes down these rivers. I think the rivers should be opened up and utilized as far as a draw, whether you're putting parks along it or whatever. If you look at some other towns like Southbury, you look at their main street, looking at like the mall property, it's not always put the buildings right on the street. If you look at the Southbury area, they have a huge amount of grass area, sidewalk, and then a parking lot and whatever's going on. So you have the walking area, you have the place to put snow, you don't have to payload everything out. And you have to think about the cost of these things when you're looking at how you're developing it. You know, I mean, if we're looking for buildings to be on the sidewalk edge, and that's what a lot of the plans that I see, I don't think that's the best way to go for Bristol. So, you know, they have to start looking at these areas, picking them up, you know, looking at what is right. There's no reason we can't have a walking path or a bike path along some of the most beautiful sections of the town, and a lot of that is along the rivers and wetland areas. There's a lot of areas along the rivers and wetland areas that need to be cleaned up. I don't know whose property they are, even the old city waste station down the center of Forestville. I mean, if you ever walk down there, it's the biggest mess in the world. That could be beautiful walking all the way toward Plainville area. But, you know, those are some of the concerns that I think, if you really look at some of those key properties that are run down, need to be torn down. And if you're looking for parking in the Forestville area, there's plenty of old buildings in the Forestville area that could be taken down and make all kinds of parking. And that is really the area where people, I think, would travel on foot and go to restaurants and bars and things like that in that area. I don't think the downtown area of North Main Street is going to be as successful as the Forestville area.
Michelle Evans, Old Turnpike Road, Bristol. I'd like to piggyback on Elizabeth Balin's remarks and this gentleman saying, like the coolness of back in the 60s. I lived in the 60s. I was a huge shopper downtown. You couldn't get a parking spot downtown, even when the strip was already there. So I don't think it was cool to drive down, go down to Route 6 and shop, because it was much nicer, because we had wonderful shops in downtown Bristol. We had character. My greatest fear is that the new plans for Depot Square are going to totally ruin our downtown beauty. It'll never come back if you put 5-story, 4-story buildings that jut straight up with like Fairfield Inn and Suites type structures. I mean, it's got to mirror what we have. This gentleman also mentioned that we have to keep our character. We're not going to keep our character with buildings like that. I think we need people like this commission to really keep an eye on it. It's not that we mind having young people. I love young people. I think they're great. And I think there's a real need, and we do want to attract them. But let's attract them and keep a close handle on what's allowed to be built there. I mean, it's not what it is, it's what it looks like. And right now the plan, in my opinion, is just not Bristol. And it's not what I want for Bristol. Would Simsbury let that go into their downtown? Would Granby? Would Farmington? No. Well, are we any less of a community than they are? I don't think so. And for a long time, the designs of our building have been horrible looking. I've always said we needed a big plan for the town, for structures. Because if you drive through Farmington, Avon, they always have these beautiful Williamsburg-type buildings. Like George Carpenter built a beautiful building in our downtown. Why would we have a beautiful building like that, and then we have that modernistic thing that's right next door to it, and then we have across the street a church that looks like a mansard roof, and then now we're going to build Fairfield Inn and Suites and massive, without any retail to even speak of downtown. I mean, you guys need to keep a close eye on this. You can't let this happen to us. You just can't let it happen to us. I mean, I'm older, so I'm probably never going to feel But I want to leave something and not go to my grave saying, I didn't fight for what I loved about Bristol. And Bristol is a really good community full of really good people. But we've really gotten shortchanged because our image outside of Bristol is not what it should be. It's not what we are. So, I mean, we need serious work. This affects me very deeply, and I think you understand that. Memorial Boulevard, Ellen's doing a phenomenal job with Memorial Boulevard School. I've been seeing projected high costs out there. Well, maybe they're not going to be as bad as they're looking right now. Maybe we can step back and maybe we can do it, not be as grandiose in the beginning, and maybe we can still make it happen, making other people excited about it and not saying, well, that's a huge price tag. But if we can certainly build a firehouse at that price tag, we can certainly have a cultural center for that price tag. So that's all I have to say. I'm just begging that you keep a really close eye, because I think fundamentally that and what happens in the West End in that Park Street area, we're getting a new ball club up there. Hopefully that's the beginning of something great. Something long past due that should have been done in a previous administration is now happening. But we lost a lot in the interim years because that administration didn't know what they were doing. And we have to keep our minds open. We have to respect all age groups, not just ours, not just the young. We have to come together, but we need a strong, strong hand on what design goes on Depot Square. Thank you.
One more comment. Just listening, I actually forgot to mention a couple of things. Another things that are when we build something that are permanent structures for very long times, like bridges and things. I see some of the bridges that we build, there's absolutely no fascia on them. They're not appealing to the areas at all. If you look in Plainville, there's a bridge going out toward the Naval Center out there that they did, and the walls on there, it's a beautiful railings going over the bridge. I mean, if you're going to build a bridge and spend that kind of money, it should look appealing to the area. The other thing is green technology. We talked about sustainability. I do HVAC and things like that. I think we need to look at, kind of like Cavanta, where we're actually getting some power benefit from burning trash and that kind of stuff. There's other green technologies, like you could use wastewater to heat algae pools to make biofuel if you wanted to, which we could run city vehicles on. It's a good way to get rid of and treat the wastewater. There's power, making some sort of power consumptions off the rivers and things that we have. Even if it's in a small scale and you're only plugging, 10 electric police cars into or something like that. I mean, it's a vision to where we can actually go and utilize some of these different areas.
I think that the plan issues that we have, I love the planning process. I think that this is a great exercise. I'm glad that communities have to go through it, whether some of them balk at it or don't. I think we've always done very well with it. My concern emanates from the fact that we as a community, and I'm not picking on your commission or elected officials or anyone, but we as a community have historically been extremely inept at connecting the dots. We have all these ideas and we have all these projects, and we have a lack of communication and collaboration when it comes to executing. So we have these starts, we have these lurches, and it concerns me that the implementation committee, which I think is a phenomenal idea and is long overdue, is only 2 paragraphs on section 16. I think that needs to be the most important pivotal piece of what we do here, or else we're going to continue the tradition of having all these great ideas and having the plan of conservation and development largely ignored or used as a tool to either stop something or disprove something. The best example I can give you, I know you don't want historical data, but I think what illustrates my point is the fact in the last plan, back in, I think it was 1989, there was a plan to add active recreational space to the city's inventory. A plan was executed. A parcel of land, open space, was purchased. plans were developed, and at some point, 5 years into the process, we as a community decided, oh, but we don't want to do this. We don't have the intestinal fortitude for this. Even though that project, which was the Roberts property, spoke directly to adding value, community value, attracting families, and those families are important for a lot of the reasons that we discussed today, but also because as we have that aging demographic, and as they start making other decisions about where they want to live, who's going to buy their houses? That's a critical point. And if we are not making our community attractive, either because we have a good infrastructure, strong education, or enhancements. Enhancements mean recreation. It means opportunities to do things. It means connecting active and passive. Roberts property was actually next to 47 acres of passive recreation. That's the interconnection. It sits in a neighborhood that does not have recreational facilities, which is an upper middle-class neighborhood. To me, it's a no-brainer. But what concerns me is that we have this entire plan. It was executed through a priority in that plan of conservation and development, and there was no follow-through. We need to have more communication, and the point being is you could have the best plan, and this plan, I echo everyone's comments, it's well-written, and it's appealing to read, and it's something that I think everybody is going to use, hopefully. But the point is what's the connection between your plan of conservation and development, which is really the strategy for the next decade, and the 5-year capital improvement committee, which actually decides the funding priorities? How is this communicated to the water board? Has the water board seen this plan? Because it talks about natural resources. Has it gone to the city council in terms of draft, and have those members read it? Not sure. There's some significant pivotal points here that we need to connect those dots on, and it concerns me, especially now as we're heading into a Memorial Boulevard restoration project, which could be the catalyst for downtown. It's a gateway project. It's something that people across the gamut of generations cares about, but yet now we're approaching the point where there's going to be a price tag attached to whether we're going to renovate and restore that building. And my question to you is, where is that going to go? Is it going to go the route of the Roberts property, of downtown from 40 years ago where bad decisions were made? Or is it going to continue to sit empty, and are we going to continue to pay to have that building empty because we don't have the intestinal fortitude to make it happen? And what can this plan do to provide that cohesion so that all of these groups, including the ones that have funding and policy jurisdictions, understand the importance of this planning document? John, I'd like an answer.
So would I, by the way.
If I can make a couple of observations. First of all, just so you and the other members of the public know, are aware, that before the Planning Commission goes out to a formal public hearing on this, which we anticipate will probably early June, by law, the document has to be referred by this commission to the City Council. And the City Council has, I think, 65 days to review the document, discuss it. They hold their own hearing if they choose, and gives the council the opportunity to make comments or recommendations to the Planning Commission. So there is a formal process for doing that.
But it doesn't make them read it, right?
Well, nothing makes...
It'll be a pop quiz at the end, though.
Yeah.
I think the answer to that is that the residents of the community ultimately are the ones who will get make their council members read it. Certainly encourage them to. And just to follow up on Councilmember Gonzalo's comments about the implementation. My observation over 30 years of working for the city, being city planner, is that very often, and this is not an indictment of any particular council, I think in general, the plan of conservation development, since I've been here, has tended to be viewed as the Planning Commission's document as opposed to the city's document. The state law under which the municipalities create these documents gives that authority to the Planning Commission. They are the board that is responsible in virtually every community in Connecticut and elsewhere for preparing and adopting the plan. I think what's happened as far back as 1989, which was the first plan I was involved in. It's viewed very often as the Planning Commission's document. They prepared it, they adopted it, it must be theirs. And I think certainly with the previous plan and with this plan, I think the Planning Commission has made many efforts to reach out to the public to as best you can, recognize you can't survey 60,000 people. The Planning Commission has tried in the past and this plan to try to have this plan be as representative of the community at large as it can. It's still viewed as the Planning Commission's plan, and I think the challenge is for people here and other people in the community to try to get everybody on board. Not everybody's going to agree with everything that's in the document. There are going to be things that you're simply not going to like about it. You try to build as much consensus as possible. But I think if everybody embraces it, or more people embrace it than just the Planning Commission, I think the likelihood of success in implementing some of the ideas that are in the plan and that people here have talked about is greatly increased. I think a good example, and I always hesitate to go back to this, but I think it's a good example, is the West End neighborhood study. I think some people in the room are familiar with it. It's a plan that, again, was done by the Planning Commission. There was an interest at the time that was done by the City Council, concerns about the West End. And I think one of the successes of that plan, recognizing it's a neighborhood document, it's a neighborhood plan, it's much more focused, is that it's been followed up by not just local government, and the Planning Commission, the Zoning Commission. The West End Neighborhood Association, I think, is a great example of a recommendation that was in that plan that had nothing to do with the city directly, and there were people who were involved in that whole study who said this is an important component of helping to implement that plan. But that's where it's going to, ultimately that's where it's going to come from, and it's tough. It's a challenge to get people involved.
I think it's been my experience over the years that there's really sort of two key parts to a plan. The first of which is the vision. Where do we want to go from here? And the second thing is the implementation. So the fact that the Planning Commission has the statutory authority to prepare a plan gives them the ability to think big about the future of the city and the issues that are affecting them. The challenge is the statutes don't give them the authority to be able to implement it. What they really need to do is to work, as Ellen points out, with other boards and committees and commissions in the city to try to get everybody pulling in the same direction. So I wrote down here this everybody heard of the presidential football? The presidential football is what the Secret Service carries around launch codes, so that should there be some sort of major emergency or whatever. Let's consider the PoCD to be our football in the city. And it's really the job of the Planning Commission with the vision to turn it over to people and groups and organizations that can implement, because we're going to need to work with the other groups and communities in the city. So I think we have prepared a plan which right now is strong on vision, and I think good advice to the Commission is that as we refine the draft, as we move closer to implementation, maybe what we need to do is beef that section up a little bit to talk about what other communities have done and how we can be successful. I think as Alan points out, it doesn't make it happen. But if we can sort of show how other communities have been successful at doing the things that we can do, we increase our chances for success. And I think that's the goal of the planning process.
Andy Adams, 67 Bakery Drive, Bristol. Lifelong resident. I want to thank you guys. I know you put into, so thank you, because you put a lot of time and effort into trying to make this community a better community. A couple of points that I want to kind of interject is I'd like to see the bike path and a walkability, especially along the Quabbin River. We actually have that piece of, I don't know if you want to call it amenity or whatever, in Bristol. I think we can utilize that to our full potential. We have people walking the boulevard all the time, and I think just walking along the river, actually having benches over there. I've gone down to Rockwell Park and actually kind of gone down to where you can sit on the rocks and just watch the river and kind of listen to some music. So I think we should utilize that resource. One of my concerns is the corner of North Main Street and Farmington Avenue, where the old Irving's Army Navy store used to be, which ended up moving out onto the avenue down by Staples. That area has been empty for years. So the owners of the property took it down. I think they wanted to put a drive-through bank or something, and with the zoning, it didn't follow the needs or the requirements. So that piece of property's been sitting there, and that's another gateway into Bristol from the Plymouth Terryville Center. So I know you probably can't do very much, but it'd be nice if we could somehow enforce something to be done with that property, because it's been vacant a long time. As far as the downtown, I'm not going to get into that because I think everybody knows where I feel. I like the mixed use. I like the retail. I think residential is needed, some residential. I'm not for the low income, but I am for the residential that attracts my age group, the group that's looking to retire, as well as those young professionals that are looking for the walkability, which in turn will be a key component is the Memorial Boulevard. Thank you, thank you, thank you for not allowing the city to sell the building. Again, I want to commend Councilman Sacco along with Jim Albert and the rest of the task force on what they're doing. I think they're working very hard to come up with a real plan and looking at phasing into making that a destination. And if that goes through and we can actually do what we can, that building has so much potential. Bristol can actually bring people in to spend their dollars here instead of leaving town. So again, thank you for all your hard work. I think the report was well done. I didn't get to be one of the people that you sampled on the survey, but that's okay. I do know several people actually did get a phone call, and they thought it was a great idea. They're not involved at all with the city, so it was nice that they actually got that phone call, and 2 of them had a cell phone number and 1 had a landline. So again, the report was great, and I applaud you, and I look forward to seeing more good things done here.
Thank you. John Rowley.
Hi, Jerry Raffagnello, lifelong resident and chairman of the ZBA. So I've been working with plans of development since 1991, and appreciate all your hard work. I think this is an outstanding plan. It's very well written, well documented, lovely illustrations and supporting documentation inside. Great presentation today, Glenn. Thank you very much for attacking it at a very high level. A couple comments. I worked in IBM for years in a department called Plans and Controls. And every year we did a strategic plan, an operating plan, and put in place a number of controls to make sure that the plans were implemented properly. What we saw here today is our strategic plan. And it's a vision for the city, where we want to go, how we want to guide our development. The piece that's missing that the councilor is looking for is the operational plan. How do you take these visions that we've outlined here today and we're all contributing to, rightly so, and put them into an operational plan that makes these things happen? And that's not going to be just government that makes that happen. It's a public-private effort that's going to make that happen. If you look at what the government supported on Main Street, North Main Street, and just the streetscape improvements, you saw a whole bunch of private development take place to improve all those streetscapes. So regardless, I heard some comments before about ugly buildings. If you take a ride up North Main Street, and look at the buildings that were restored there, you're going to see some beautiful architecture, old architecture that was cool back in the 60s. Okay, so as we roll out this vision and get that private and public partnership to implement some of the ideas, you're going to see a lot of beautiful buildings restored and built in a new thing. That's why I love the emphasis in the report about influencing commercial design. You know, every Dunkin' Donuts doesn't have to be orange and yellow. Every Home Depot doesn't have to be orange. But if you go to Glastonbury, you'll see brick fronts and you'll see different designs. They have different formats that we can use. So we need to take a special care as new people come in with those national firms to make sure that they implement designs that are in keeping with our plan of development, what we're trying to do here. I like the emphasis on the structured parking. We had some plans for downtown that had parking ramps along the bank there. that didn't take up as much real estate, that allowed us to stack the parking and get the density that we needed. I think that's a good thing. I thought the study was a little light on the rail. We have a rail study that the state has commissioned for us. I think that's going to be important long-term, to get that rail corridor between here and Waterbury, New York, which is where a lot of our traffic is coming from and going to. The West End study, I'm glad to see that was incorporated. I worked on that initially, and that was a great, great exercise in getting community involved and getting good feedback in terms of what we want to happen. And you're seeing now, again, that private investment of all the people and the businesses in the West End trying to make that vision happen. And to address another comment too, I think there's a plan in place for the Route 6 improvements parallel to Camp Street. So that should be rolling out. We'll be seeing that pretty soon. And that's going to address a lot of those traffic needs. So, great job. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Craig Meyer. I share your frustration with the City Council thinking of this as the Planning Commission's plan, but that starts with the plan itself. I know you reached out to the general public and that was vital, but did you reach out? Did you engage the Board of Ed, the Bristol Brooklyn Health District, the Chamber of Commerce, United Way? Did you take these people by the throat, because that's what it takes, and bring them to some kind of sit-down and make them get engaged in the plan? And I think the answer is no, because it's hard to do. I know it's hard to do. I know it's hard to do. But one of the other benefits of that is then your implementation section, which can be as much as a chapter. I've seen some plans that Glenn's written where the implementation section is a chapter. In the implementation section, you specifically say that this goal is the duty of the water board. The board is a bad phrase. Implementing a sidewalks plan, the Board of Ed would be involved in that, because obviously sidewalks are important to the Board of Ed. So that's one way you get, respect's the wrong word, but that's the way you get the town to recognize this as being the town's plan and not just your plan by making it the town's plan.
One more comment on this.
Let's go first.
Speaking of when things get brought up, then makes you start thinking about, you mentioned the rail. And another area, and I'm talking with my father that's been a long time resident of Bristol too, was I happened to go to the brewery that's along North Main Street there. And I never realized how beautiful that building was on that side. And he goes, well, that's where the old street used to go. The old North Main Street used to be actually up on that side. So maybe old might be still good, and you might want to look into some of the old city plans if you want to bring some of that heritage back, some of the buildings and churches and things that are along those areas. Maybe incorporate that into the mall property too, as far as not just the lower section of the North Main, but the upper section on the other side of the tracks. As far as the rail, even if we can't get the funding or whatever from the state to get the rail to actually tie into anything, even if we use the rail as a people mover from North Main Street area, the rails that are already there, which follow the river, which everybody wants to take a look at, all the way down into the Forestville area. And even if you just had some kind of shuttle that moved back and forth through the city from North Main to the Forestville. I don't know if that's a possibility to use those rails to do that. It might be a nice attraction type draw for the city, just to have some kind of rail transportation within, like we used to have with the trolleys and things like that. So there's a lot of hidden buildings and architecture that we don't see because of the changes that were made in the city.
12 Year Road, 126 Frederick Street. I think what you have to look at, going Woodland Street, and how did the city allow people to take the attics and make them three-family? Okay, it looks horrible on Woodland Street. Go left and right. That shouldn't happen. Now you go down Park Street, you talk about Park Street going downhill. Look at the meters on the houses. From 2 meters, it's going to 3 and 4. How is the city allowing them to convert attics, okay, into apartments? That's horrible. And as far as bike paths, there is a bike path from Florida all the way to Canada. Each town is agreeing with this. And if Bristol incorporated into that bike path, it brings people into Bristol. They go to restaurants, they go to motels, there's a map. Bristol must have it. It's a bike path all the way from Florida right to Canada. Thank you very much.
Tim Fury, I'm wearing many hats today. I worked on a few land use projects with the commission over the years. I serve on the Chamber of Commerce, its immediate past chairman, was previous chairman of the hospital board, and I served on regional planning for 25 years. So I've actually read the whole report, much to my wife's chagrin last night. So the first thing I want to note is as you're evolving this in the next few months, and I think it's important that this is the beginning of the evolution of it. I hope it's treated that way, not like we've got this document ready and there's not going to be changes. Remember, it's not only a planning tool. It is going to be the long-term marketing tool for the City of Bristol, which I think Councilman Zappo kind of alluded to. People will use it for their own purposes. Purposes to promote the community, purposes to degrade the community, purposes to attack things, purposes to promote things. So as you're reviewing a lot of the polling information you have there as charts and a lot of the data you've put in there as charts, I'd encourage you to think about what does this do for us here. So you have 4 graphs in there that say Bristol has the lowest return on housing investment of any town within 5 towns. Well, there's a lot of things to say that we have to develop strategies to increase housing values. We may even say we're lagging behind. But if we're poking all the information out there that's going to be on the internet for the next 5 years, that's going to be tough for a lot of our realtors. And in all these markets. Now, I know this hasn't come to the Development Committee of the Chamber of Commerce because I'm on it. Al and I have discussed it. I don't know when his thought is we're going to be in that process after today, but that has not happened. I don't know that anyone sat down with the Bristol Hospital to engage this discussion, but I've had this discussion in the last 3 months with Councilman Zappo about the exact issues that were raised when we were doing some other projects, and it would have been very timely if that had already happened. I know the hospital would be very engaged. They would have directed me to be engaged for that thought. So I encourage you, as you're going back through it, say to yourselves, what do these things really add to the report? Can we do these things in a different way that accomplish the same goal for planning purposes, but don't lay something out for the next decade or more since your last plan of development in a way that negatively could be used or impact the community? There's a section in there on ridgeline protection. We're not Meriden. I don't know what that really adds for our community, and if we're going to talk about ridgeline protection, we've got to talk about what does that really affect here. So I'm not telling the answer today, but I just want to concentrate on things that mean something. We have 11% of our land remaining undeveloped, and it still talks about a stress point should be a fee in lieu of open space for developing open land if people don't leave open space. Well, to me, in a community like Bristol, if you were out in Towland or someplace, that may mean something where there's a lot of available developable open space. We have 11%. So what you're saying is the citizens of this community, one of which isn't me, who have kept their land as open space since 1700, we're going to take money from you that we didn't take from barely anyone else. And we have done fee in lieu of open space on a very, very limited basis. I've been doing land use for 32 years in the community. I just think it's inappropriate. I don't like, it's like charging a ticket to the last guy to walk into the dance. I just don't think that should be the stress. Preserving open space, deciding how to preserve open space, but it's like preserving historic properties. We as a community get to decide we want to do that. We have to invest in that, not the guy who has the opportunity to pick his pocket. And we know 2,684 acres of open space. Is that good for a community our size, with the acreage our size? Do we have enough open space? The report doesn't discuss that. We may have, if we have a good amount of open space, and our community should be proud of that, which I think we should be, let's say it in the report and say, well, we can take some more opportunities for pocket parks and other things. We've talked about that downtown. I think that's important, but we ought to stress that. I think we should be very proud of our parks. It doesn't, I don't know if it mentions all the work we've done on Rockwall Park and all the great things that have happened. You've got to take those shots here. I just know, very minor thing, the All Heart logo in the plan needs to be updated because they actually adopted one. It's a little bit different. That's a very positive thing. The design review process sounds great in theory, but as a land use lawyer, I just caution you, more bureaucratic stuff, more employees, more whatever. I think there's a lot of ways we could do design review and encouragement, similar to what Mr. Raffanello said, without overlaying 3 more FTEs at City Hall. I really don't want that. There's talk in the report about a diversity council. Doesn't say, you know, reinstituting the diversity council. Doesn't say what it was, what it did, what its goals were. We got lots of committees and things in this community trying to encourage all the diversity and things. I just don't know what that one does within our plan of development. I don't know that we have a problem there. At page 52, it talks about the goal to establish things that create resiliency. Well, that reminds me of my stockbroker in 2008 who said to me, I should say, that reminds me of my former stockbroker in 2008 who just said to me, Tim, ride the wave, with no thought behind what that meant, and I did, and I lost $100,000, which I've since gained back, by the way. But so just a blanket thing like that is the kind of thing I think that a few speakers talked about, that we need to have more of a plan or a direction. In the downtown section, and it's on page 56, we downplay the role of as low impact of services such as lawyers, one of which I am, and they asked us to leave the downtown in 1962, and now they want us to come back downtown, and we're a block away, doctors, etc. But all those service industries that are downtown now, if there wasn't that, you would have nothing, because that's what's downtown. Tracy Driscoll, Fury Dunham, and the doctor's offices, we are it, Signal Left. So all those things are high priority, I agree, but don't downplay a lot of those services remaining and being part, because we employ people, they buy things, and they have been before the demolition of downtown and since the demolition of downtown, the one steady thing besides City Hall that's been down there, and I think you ought to think about addressing that a little bit.
But they were upstairs, not street level.
Many are above now too, with the Tracy Driscoll building, etc. On page 62, it's just very broad about how open spaces should be preserved and it conflicts with other provisions you have. On page 69, I think is a glaring separation from where the Central Connecticut Chamber of Commerce and I believe the City Council is going. You talk about our goal is to preserve and encourage the development of white-collar workers in the City of Bristol. Well, unless you start adding a definition of white-collar workers to the high-tech industrial workers that we are unique in the state for having in Central Connecticut, we've made a gross error. We need to salute and yell about all of our small factories, our high-tech industrial. We are strong there, and I will tell you for a fact the Chamber of Commerce, working with the state of Connecticut, working with the City of Bristol, is trying to create that as a node of something that's why you should be here. The German company that was in Farmington is coming here for a reason. And that's almost like poking a stick in their eye. So I think that goes against what we're trying to achieve. Now I agree, when we talk about modern industrial world, most of the guys working in these factories are really white-collar workers. But they're working on machines, and I also don't want to insult our heritage. If you look at the new logo I just asked you to put in your to replace in here, it now has an industrial cog inside the B, and that's because that's our heritage, and we should be proud of that. And that's what is the essence of what I grew up around in the community. You talk about the enterprise zone. You do a good job with that. But you missed the new statutory zone that encompasses the Southeast Industrial Park for the Yukon high-tech portion. And I think you ought to talk about that in your report, because it's a positive, and you ought to include that zone on that. That's a very minor thing, but I think it's an opportunity to include some information as a marketing tool, which this is as well, for that. From a zoning point of view, it has, which was in the last point of view about prohibit, business expansion onto side street residential streets. So in one section you have a line that says just prohibit it. 2 pages later you have one that says only do that where it's appropriate considering some factors. That language makes sense to me. Prohibit makes none, and then you say only if it's professional offices. Well, we just were able to secure, working with the zoning commission, a limited expansion of a business zone for City True Value Hardware, which is a tremendous business in our community. The zoning commission and this commission, commenting on it, did the right thing and let us do it. Your plan of development, again, wouldn't have allowed that. There are exceptions to every rule, so you use terms like appropriateness and everything. And they were restricted in old, non-conforming lands, and it works out well for the neighborhoods, for the goals of the city, all the way around. And the more consistent language was on page 77 of your regulations. Page 80 is one of the examples. We have housing figures that don't add anything to the plan, that seem to degrade the City of Bristol. In terms of housing, it talks repeatedly about the need for elderly housing. I think that's based on the demographic trends you anticipate coming. But there's no data anywhere in the report about what we have for housing now. And it's my belief, based on what I've worked on with you, to approve some more elderly housing, what's coming down the road. Ed D'Amato will be filing next week for the Jennings School, to use Jennings School for 55 and older housing, a portion of it. Sammy Vasile's got 48 units approved down on Lake Avenue, which he started construction of. Janik just put up a whole bunch of new buildings. The city has just agreed to be working on a contract with a developer for both Bingham and O'Connell School for elderly housing. Billy Delfino has 1 or 2 units on Stafford Avenue that's available for elderly housing. We have Gaylord, we have the Wenzel Towers. So I'm not so sure that's an accurate statement. And I think that you need to, or we need to as a community, talk to those major people who control these lease units, the Janiks, the Delfinos, about what are their occupancy rates, what do they anticipate? Do we think it's enough to handle the demographic trend that we see, or else we may just be throwing up a lot of elderly housing that is detracting from what they can do. I think we can do what's there now. I think there's a demand, but I just query that just seems to be a statement with no view of what is actually available in the community today. In the West End section, you talk about improving public safety, and it's said in a way that, if I was reading it for the first time, just means it's an unsafe place to be now. And I may be wrong, but I always thought, based on my early discussions with people when we were working on the West End study, that it wasn't an unsafe place to be, but there was a perception, and then the perception was the problem. And if it's one or the other, the report shouldn't reflect it in the negative way. It talks about the need for taking care of our homeless. There's no data about that or any information whatsoever about the status of our homeless. I don't know if any studies or things have been done about that, but just to say it seems to imply we have a larger homeless population that we may or may not have. I don't know the answer to that, but there's a lot of data in this report, and we certainly need to take care of our community, but if it's not accurate, we have to talk about that accurately, because that's a pretty bold statement. And sidewalks, very important. Walkability is important. Both sidewalks and pavement contrast with developing environmentally friendly TSS runoffs and stuff. The new regulations coming out of DEP will cost Bristol an additional $1.3 million a year to complying with, although we're not passing any more unfunded mandates at the state level. $1.3 million. So I think walkability, there's just between walkability and sidewalk. So I think they're going to talk about walkability. There's a lot of creative ways to have walkability. It isn't a hard surface sidewalk, I think. But it's something we ought to at least build into the plan. And as you know, I'm going to be representing a lot of developers who'll be in here saying, guys, you want 80% TSS removal, blah, 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 but you want us to do all these other things too. In terms of the hospital, speaking as a hospital advocate, nice little section, we appreciate it. We should have recognized a long time ago that it's a unique area and there's needs. But I'd like to see, as a marketing tool and as a truth, it beefed up a little bit, as well as the ESPN portion, to recognize that it is 1,800 employees. It does input $170 million a year into our local economy. It is the primary health care resource for the community. And those type of facts and some of the more positive things about the hospital should be in the plan, because A, they deserve it, and B, it's a marketing tool, and it's an opportunity when someone's picking that thing online or thinking about coming here or developing this site, they can see it. And if you talk to major developers, one of the things they do consider when coming into an area is the strength of the healthcare system in the area. So a plan of development is a good place to tout some of those resources, hospital and others. I just think of that as a marketing opportunity. Thank you for bearing with me, but I actually did read the whole thing, so I wanted to get it through. Okay, thank you. If you have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer them on behalf of all those hats that I wear. I do think you need, if you haven't, and I don't know what's happened as part of your process, other than what I read in the paper, to engage separately, directly with ESPN, some representative that is in with Alan all the time, about what are the things in our development process we could do better for you. And I know we've treated them very well, because I sit in the meetings and I watch how you all interact with them, which is great. Thank you. Keep doing that. But it's nice to be asked. So I think we should try to engage them. When the mayor of Greenville was here a couple of weeks ago, and I wasn't able to attend, but I watched the video of it, one of the things he said is you have to kiss the tuchuses of these major employers and work with them and engage them. That's crucial to the rest of this plan that you've talked about, the public-private partnership. So I think we need to sit down, we need as a group, or through whatever vehicles you choose, to sit with the hospital, sit with the chamber, to sit with ESPN, to sit with representatives of Barnes Group, if for nothing else, to say you did it. It's important. So I agree with Councilman Zappo wholly on that. And by the way, thank you for trying to save my old chippy song, and I do agree with your thoughts. Thank you.
Anybody else?
One thing I didn't mention, Marguerite Peterson, 83 Anderson Avenue, when I was talking before, a lot of what makes a community really, really nice are trees, landscaping, that kind of thing. And usually they're put in, but then there's no budget to take care of them. Memorial Boulevard looks great. I don't know if there's a arborist that's part of your town, but a lot of times people put up these beautiful trees and whatnot. They get damaged, nobody takes care of them. Now it detracts. I drive through Cheshire every morning to go to work, and they put, I believe it's correct, Branford pears all along there. They look beautiful in the springtime, white flowers, but the trees are very upright, but they're very tight crotches. They constantly, a tight crotch on a branch is very, very weak. They constantly break. So there are trees that are meant for streetscaping and whatever that don't have the tight crotches or the way that they grow. But so many times, even at Foxwoods, I'll see these beautiful trees, and then they hire Joe's Tree Service. They're not arborists. Arborists are the doctors that do preventative care, that take care of the trees, and the other people just cut things. So they will chop the top rather than bringing it back to a meter so that it grows properly. They'll take off more than a quarter of the tree, so now you get these opportunistic shoots, and people think, oh, look, it's happy. That means it's under stress, and all of a sudden you get these little nodules everywhere. So just putting in a good word for trees, if you put them in, have the resources to take care of them, and if they are in the street or they're in tree wells or stuff, that you have the true professionals that can design the containers, being surrounded by pavement and constantly having dog urine on them, that they will survive.
Rochelle Levens, Ultra Pet Road. I haven't read that one. Where could a person, a resident, get a copy of it?
It's online.
On
Go right to the planning
Bristol
department.
government?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. What is the plan for Riverside Avenue? Is there any 10-year plan for Riverside Avenue?
In
terms of improvement, maybe meshing it with the boulevard. It's along the river, the whole span is along the river, which could be beautiful real estate. But as we all know, it's not at its present time.
I think the plan doesn't make a specific recommendation as to Riverside. It's sort of in kind of a hybrid. It probably appears recommendations appropriate for Riverside appear in different parts of the plan. So it's kind of a gateway to the downtown. So kind of the downtown section kind of touches on it. There's business development, so the business development section kind of touches on it. So we do identify some specific areas: Forestville, Route 6, Route 72, etc. Riverside's not really called out specifically, but bits of it are everywhere. So that's a good observation.
I really have always thought it could just be such a place of beauty standing to the Memorial Boulevard.
I will point out that with regard to that, when the Planning Commission did Route 72 corridor study in the early 2000s, and that study is also online. All these studies, all these planning studies are online. That happened in the mid-2000s, before Route 72 was extended into Bristol. The Planning Commission worked with a different consultant and did a, for lack of a better term, somewhat of a master plan for the Route 72 corridor from Plainville into downtown. And there are some recommendations in that plan for Riverside Avenue.
Has any of them been implemented since the
A lot of it necessitates private developers who own properties along the road doing things that would involve sidewalk improvements and the like that the city would, or the city or the state would do. But a lot of it was in terms of future land use. There were some, I think there may have been some, when the plan would be, I think there was some recommendations for the public infrastructure. So there is a plan in place. A lot of times plans get implemented very slowly, or they don't get implemented at all, in part because it's not necessarily the responsibility of government to do everything. There may be some components of a master plan that get implemented by the local government or the state government. And a lot of it depends on property owners as well, and I think that's the case.
And what about blight? I mean, to me, a lot of Riverside Avenue would fall under blight. Because it's just...
There is a discussion on the plan.
Those properties have been unkept for so many years. And if you drive down the boulevard, that's the pride of Bristol. I mean, it's gorgeous. And then you drive down Riverside Avenue and you just, we've had some wonderful things happen, like the Carousel Museum and a few restaurants that, they're not grandiose, but they're nice, welcoming members of the community. And but then you drive along and it's like people have owned those buildings for years and never done anything to them, and they look horrible. I mean, the parking lots are, grass over. So I mean, there must be some way to control that. If there isn't, maybe we need to look at that, and there needs to be better control.
I think that there's a whole chapter in the plan about the importance of what we call character. Part of character involves the physical appearance. And there is a discussion about all the work the city's been doing in terms of property maintenance and encourages those efforts. The challenge that we have as part of the planning process is finding the right balance between public interest and private property rights. So there are times that the way people use their property passes some boundary that we as a city say, you know what, we need to do something about that. And there's other times that people just don't keep up the property the way that we would like them to. And finding that balance is really part of the hard part about what this commission, the zoning commission, other commission, the council and others in the community are trying to find. But the plan talks about the importance of character to the future so that we can be cheerleaders for Bristol and try to find these kind of choices. So,
speaking on that, why do we do studies? Why do we pay consultants and pay for studies, and 10 years later not one thing in the study has been utilized or done? Why are we paying for them then? Why don't we stop doing that if we're not prepared to do something? I mean, isn't that just wasting our money? And we're taxpayers. We're trying here. We love our community. So we need you to do what you need to do to make things happen for us.
And the commission's responsibility is to prepare the plan.
I'm not talking about this plan, I'm talking about the plan that you mentioned previously, that in the mid-2000s
And some of that, again, I think you read the plan, some of the recommendations in that plan have been implemented, others haven't. I mean, that's the nature of almost
Is
every
there any way
plan.
that I, as a resident of the community, could see that plan and see
again,
what has been implemented?
That plan is online, as I mentioned.
Okay, and what would it be called?
Okay, let's back up for a second. We're not going to get into debate here,
Right.
all right? The
No.
whole purpose is...
No.
Okay.
What would that plan be called?
It is, it's the Route 72 Florida.
Thank you.
It's on the city's website.
Under the planning commission, right? It's in the...
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the Route 70, if you go to the home page on the far left, the first tab, if you click on that, there's a drop-down. One of the lines is studies and reports, very
Good.
thorough listing there of a lot of things the city has done. It's a great resource of the work the city's done in these areas.
Thank you.
Sean Rist, lifelong resident, Bristol. Basically, most of the Planning Commission already knows where I stand on a lot of different issues on the plan. I do agree with Mr. Fury's remark regarding land use and open space. I don't know if you recall, when I was at one of the meetings, I said I'd like to see in the Plan of Conservation Development, is there a target for open space, or are we looking to achieve it? And then see either some language supporting that we're going to move in that direction, or indicating to the public. A big part of the only issues that I really have about the survey, I'm not really sure if people were privy to all the information before they were surveyed. So I have a couple questions about the survey in particular, like for example, when people were prompted about bicycle paths, was there a designation whether or not we're talking recreational bicycle paths or as an alternative mode of transportation? I heard somebody speak about complete streets today, and it's a huge difference, you know. It's just apples and oranges. So to say that survey fact that 80% of residents support bicycle paths, are we talking about making a massive investment on our roadways, or are we talking about giving somebody someplace to ride their bicycle with their family where they don't have to worry about automobiles and snow and ice and all those things? And I think it would be nice to see that represented in the plan. Another thing too, the plan, I like the fact that it actually designates state policy in there and how the plan has to, I don't know how you feel about me using the word comply with state regulations, but I think a lot of residents are unaware of the fact that certain language and certain things in the plan make a big difference on whether or not you can get funding. So as people were asked, a variety of questions about the plan, they were asked, should Bristol encourage? And I have some concerns about, does the word encourage mean the same thing to the people writing the plan as the people that were answering the questions? To me, encourage somebody to move downtown, like Bristol Rising does a great thing. They promote businesses in the downtown, and the city can use marketing and different techniques that don't really cost a lot of money to the taxpayer to encourage. But if you're talking about subsidizing, that's kind of might give somebody a different response to the question. Another thing too about the survey that I found that was not really addressed in the Plan of Conservation Development is the amount of people that said they would be leaving the city. Were those people asked why they were leaving the city specifically, or did we just move on to the next question and try to gather that result? I also agree with Attorney Fury in regards to the development of businesses and creating jobs, because I do think that that is the #1 reason why people are leaving the city and the state, is because of not a lack of jobs, because when we talk about how many jobs are in the community, people like to throw out the unemployment numbers, which aren't really representative of the fact of whether or not people are working full-time or if they're working multiple part-time jobs. And, you know, Bristol's heritage, like you said, manufacturing, that's why the cog is in the logo. So I don't see anything that really says anything about bringing manufacturing into the downtown. If the goal of the programs for the Plan of Conservation Development are to provide people access to jobs, would it be more affordable to bring businesses into the downtown area, which actually made the downtown vibrant before, not how walkable it was or the fact that we didn't have a car? In my opinion, it's that we had a lot of jobs down there. People wanted to live near their jobs, and people were setting up businesses for people to shop in where there were people already. Now, the focus on the Plan of Conservation Development and the so-called heart of the city is supposed to be the downtown. I agree with the gentleman that said that Forestville will be easier to develop than it will be the downtown of Bristol. Part of the reason for that is because the Route 72 investment that taxpayers made brought a lot of economic activity to the area of Pine Street. We had a former theater that we couldn't even run B-rate movies in before. Now we have expanding businesses popping up along in that plaza. You can use the same subsidies that you're going to use for the downtown in Forestville Center, and it's probably in there, but it's not reflecting the plan of development. For some reason, we farmed that out to people that aren't in Bristol. I'm not really clear on why, and I would like to see some more of that information about what's going on in Forestville's development. And I think if you want Bristol to grow and you want to not force people out by higher taxation, you need to pay attention to the free market. You need to pay attention to people's attitudes. If you look at the survey results in regards to housing, Bristol residents, more than 53% prefer single-family homes, but the plan leans heavily towards the expansion of different housing options because that is state policy and a way to bring capital into the city. You can do both without focusing. And I'm not saying abandon the West End. It's absolutely not the same thing. But if you have to follow a central plan, you need to have a couple different things. You need to have open society and representative government. The citizens have to be privy to all the information that has to do with the future of Bristol. That has not been demonstrated to the residents the way I would think that it should be demonstrated to the residents. And I don't want to go on anymore. And Attorney Fury is way ahead of me on criticism, and I've got the bad rap, so I'm going to leave it right alone.
Just one additional point on Route 72. We accomplished a lot with 72 as far as it went, but we really agree with to get it out to the and that's, I don't know if that's ever going to come to fruition, but I think there ought to be at least a mention of that in terms of eliminating that roadblock at the end of 72 in Bradford Park and maybe working a little farther down 72. So I think there's a long-term goal that ought to be in the plan for.
I do actually have one more question.
Just quickly, to follow up on I think there may be an opportunity in the report too, since we are a very sports-oriented town, and we're complimenting often for that, to find a place in the study to talk about all the numbers of ball fields and things we do have. And we know there's a shortage. The reason there's a shortage is because we're so engaged in those activities. We have a shortage of those facilities, and there may be an opportunity in the report to know how much usage there is and access there is, an opportunity to talk to Ed Swickless about how difficult it is for him to program the fields, because it just shows that's a very positive thing in our community. It also supports the creation, which is one of the goals for the past 20 years. My daughter came over last night with her boyfriend. We had dinner with her, and we were discussing how when she was in Brownies, we were going to hearings about new sports fields that she could be on. Now that she's 27 or 8 years old, 28 years old, we're still having that discussion, which is interesting. The other reason I stood up is because we all know that if we're all here at 9 o'clock in the morning, we must have a lot else to do today. No offense to you guys, but I have free tickets to the home show if people are interested in at Eastern High School after the
Thank you.
open to 11.
Another thing is that hasn't been
mitigation plan. I know we're talking about the waterways and that kind of stuff. You know, with the new flood maps and all that, a lot more people paying flood insurance. If we had a better hazard mitigation plan, it would lower our flood insurances for a lot of the residents as long. So some of these might draw some federal money or whichever to work these plans along the rivers and beautify, you know, Riverside Avenue and down these areas, because we're going to be helping in both ways. As far as getting a stronger hazard mitigation plan is going to lower people's costs for flood insurance. A lot more people are paying, and maybe there's an opportunity to get some federal funds. We talked about connecting like Board of Ed and things like that on the teacher also. There's no reason why maybe some of Board of Ed's budget, or maybe Board of Ed working through grants or whatever for educational areas in conservation or in green technology along our rivers, where we could actually use these as teaching tools. Hartford has the trash museum or whatever. There's no reason why we shouldn't have some teaching areas in Covanta, or like I was saying before, in doing something with our waste management plan, or doing something with power conservation along the river, or just even environmental type things where classrooms can actually get out and walk these areas without getting run over by cars. Things like that, where they can use these as teaching tools. And it's, being a teacher and seeing the changes and the changes in the demographic of the kids and the way they're wired. They don't learn the same way we do. They don't have the same backgrounds as we do. They're, as far as a totally different generation. I teach a trade, and I'm trying to say, this is how it's got to be done. And sometimes I feel like I'm talking to that wall, because they're looking at, how to save the world is, getting some hackers to go and knock down ISIS, and that's the only way that's going to happen. It's not going to be throwing bombs, and it's probably a 19-year-old kid in his bedroom that could probably do it. We have to look at what our kids are learning today and where they're going, and some of the different educational processes they're going to need to get jobs in the 21st century. And those jobs are going to be, if we look at the studies from the president and from our government, high numbers in money going to be flooding into green technology type areas. So if there's an area that Bristol can bring that in, and maybe some of that money can be used to good use, because implementation, like you say, I feel the same way. We make plans, we do nothing. We talk about it, we have studies, we do nothing. Nothing really changes a whole hell of a lot, and a lot of things just keep on their own. Our fix is tear it down.
I think the challenge with planning sometimes is that we're programmed, if you will, to quicker gratification than we sometimes see. And the challenge with planning and the evolution of a city is that, I was driving in today, founded, 1785? So you realize the city's grown up, and even from the cover of the plan, you look at what the city looked like 100 years ago. Some things have changed in that time, and some things not so much. So the challenge is we look for immediate gratification. Sometimes these things take time. And the value of a plan is to kind of set the stage for the types of things we want to try to encourage, etc. over time.
We got to do it in small. If you look at it in a huge, big picture item over 20 years, nothing's going to happen. If you set that policy in the City of Bristol that certain boards in education have to do some things to attain the goal of city planning, certain boards of money through the City of Bristol have to put certain money into those areas, then it will happen. If you don't do that, it's not going to happen. And if you can utilize, I know that there's a boundary between the property owner and those escapes along the river. We're talking about Riverside Avenue. I'm sure that if you threw them some federal money to beautify their property and utilize something else to beautify the area, they would not be saying no to it. We look at some of the money that's spent. I don't know how well it's spent. We look at the end of the boulevard with the supermarket that was going in there. I sat in the meeting, I said there's money grants gone out there. Me, run down package store, doesn't look like much, okay? So other businesses, I've owned my own business in town for over 20-something years. Never once has anybody ever approached me to say, hey, let me help you out. And before I started teaching, I employed 6 guys a year for many, many years. So we got to look at our small businesses too. Get those grants. Maybe put a committee together that just works on grants, bringing money in here. There's a lot of money, like scholarships, that doesn't get grabbed. You know, that's where you got to look.
Mary Fournier. I just wanted to address that a little bit. I also have concerns about Riverside Avenue. Kind of ugly. And I had brought that up at the BDA. I'm the council liaison at the BDA, and I've asked why can't we use some of our facade improvement funds, because we targeted the West End, we targeted North Main Street a few years ago at Forestville, and I'm hoping that that will be something the next cycle. And again, it does take time. We get X number a year for monies that we set aside for facade improvements, and again, the West End was a big area of concern, so it was used there. And the North Main Street area. So, but just so you know, I'm advocating that Riverside Avenue be included in that, because I do think it's an important piece of the puzzle.
I was wondering also, how do you weigh the plan of conservation development, the amount of information that you get from the survey of residents versus demographic information that you have, which I don't know if is the demographic report completed? That information, are they still working on that, or isn't there a demographic portion of the PoCD that was in process?
The whole plan is still work in progress. What we have now is a draft. There's more to be done. This process here is part of it. And at some point, we're going to have to sit down and meet with the commission.
Okay, so the demographic information isn't done. So how does the survey results, if you were going to make a pie chart of the survey results versus the state policies and different boards and commissions and community organizations, what would you say the weight of the concerns of the citizens, how does that weigh in relation to the other stuff when you consider in the plan?
I think everything's a balance. There are situations I've discovered over the years where the public doesn't necessarily support something because they're not aware of what the implications are. So even the issues about resiliency. I mean, one of the things that we're learning is that storm patterns are changing. But sometimes in land use we talk about a 100-year flood. What that really means is not a flood that occurs once every 100 years, but a flood that has a 1% chance of occurring in every year. And since stormwater records were kept, what we've now learned is the storm pattern and frequency is changing, and what used to be a flood with a 1% chance of occurring is now actually a 2% chance. It happens twice as often, and what is a 1% storm is 20% more water than we're used to. Well, think in the city. Our storm drainage was installed for what we thought was going to happen, and we thought we were good. We did a good job, and the world changed on us in ways that we couldn't have anticipated. So sometimes the public isn't aware about, well, the drainage in my street has always been there. It's always been fine. The issue is, yeah, but you know what? It may not be. So sometimes we as planners have to balance the demographic information with what the public's aware of and what we think is good public policy for the city, and set the dialogue in motion. We're not necessarily going to solve the issue of more frequent, more severe storms, but we need to get it out on the radar screen so we can talk about it. And I think that's kind of the role of the plan here. It's not always to solve every problem, but just to say, listen, hey, this is how we can make the city a better place, is being aware of these issues. And it's possible that even the floodplain discussion of the riverways could be a way to accomplish an open space objective, a drainage objective, a character quality of life objective, and possibly it's a good strategy for us. So we don't know yet, because so much depends on the fiscal capability of the city, et cetera. But the issue is, if we could do these things, it could make the city a better place. So there's no answer about what the balance is or a pie chart. The issue is it could be different for every issue in the plan. The question, in a sense, for the city is this a good vision for us going forward? And I think that's what the Planning Commission has been shooting for. What's a good vision for us to try to achieve? And it's not anybody else's plan for Bristol. It's our plan for Bristol.
Wow, did we do well?
Okay.
Well, it depends on which, see how this clock says we're at 11:03.
My clock is...
Okay, well, in that case, who's got the last minute? Who's got the last comments?
Just curious, how much time and money, at Matt Pittman, 82 Putnam Street, is put towards letting people know about things like this? Because I'm not sure this really represents much of the community, and I've heard it brought up many times here, council members and people out here talking about involving the community, and it was just mentioned again right there. It just seems like a little more time can be put towards, and money, and is there money available for that? I have an online company, I do marketing, you have to put things in people's face. And if it was, Sean posted things, it's the only way I found out about this. And it just seems like
we have been very frustrated through this process.
Yeah.
The methodologies for making the community aware of what's going on. So it used to be that almost everybody sort of read the newspaper. But nowadays,
nobody reads the newspaper.
I agree.
And most people are online, and there are ways. And it doesn't cost a lot of money, but it does cost money. It does cost money to put things in people's face. I know. This is what I do every day. So it doesn't cost a lot of money, though. And is there allocation for that? I mean, can it, because I think you might be surprised.
If I might, we've had this conversation in our office, and I think that getting the word out, just the issue described, I think is one of the hardest and most frustrating things that planners, people who do this professionally, volunteers, such as commission members, face all the time. How do you get the word out? You can't knock on 25,000 doors. It's very difficult. What we've tried to do, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we've done, the perfect job doing it. If we did, we'd probably be holding this meeting in a much larger space. We've tried to put all of the information associated with this project online. It's at the city's website. Now, if people don't go to the website and look around, they're not going to find it. But we've tried as best we can to put, there have been a whole series of discussion papers that the Commission has gotten. Those have gone up online. The draft plan is up online. So we've tried to use as best we can the city's website as a means of communication. We've tried to, we've sent out press releases. You're right, people don't read the newspapers like they used to.
Getting the newspaper to print to it.
Right. It is difficult. A couple of the online papers have ran the press releases, which was good. We tried to get the word out. We sent out the press release to any number of organizations in town, the Chamber of Commerce, I think Bristol Community Organization, a number of other organizations.
Can you use the school messaging thing?
Everybody has text today.
Yeah. Well, but part of that is like getting people to, if people, if you will, I guess, sign up. I mean, my knowledge of technology is not always the most advanced. I think there are ways to do it. I think we would certainly encourage any ideas of how best to get that, get people to come out. I think we're open to those suggestions. Having said that, when your budget is limited, anything that you can do at low or no cost is it's government, and government doesn't like to spend people's money.
Well, and that's my point. My point was, is there money that is allocated towards that? Or is it just strictly right now, It's whatever we can do for free to let people know, because that's not going to work. To get it out. Again, I do this, so, and I can't help. You know, I can help, but it does take some money. Not a lot of money, but there's things like Facebook. A lot of people are on Facebook, and you could target this town only. But it costs money. It's not a lot of money, but it costs some money to do that. And you could let everybody know that is on Facebook, that lives in Bristol, it will appear on their page. That's just one method. But the texting one through the school is a great idea, actually, because I get them all the time. I have kids in school. You know, wow, that's every single parent that gets those alerts instantly. Well, no, and that's, you know, that's true. I mean, really. Wow.
I think the only thing I wanted to add to the whole thing is that, because you were talking about some issues related to time, the wrap-up slide, in essence, that I had is that this input and feedback is really important for us, and we'll investigate or talk about other ways to approach this. But we are under a bit of a time deadline here, in the sense that the statutes require that Bristol that come July 1 of 2015, if Bristol has a plan which is more than 10 years old, and our current plan was adopted in the year 2000, so we're already almost 15 years old, all right? That if we have a plan that's more than 10 years old, we're ineligible as a community for state discretionary grants. We don't want that to happen. If we're going to get grants for rehab, or if we're going to try to preserve open space, or we're going to try to fix our catch basins or do other stuff, we don't want to miss that deadline. So I'm not saying that we're not going to be as successful as we might otherwise be, but in the process, our commitment, if you will, my commitment to the Commission and the Commission's commitment to the community is we're going to be done by July 1.
Why did we miss it last time by 5 years?
No, the law just went into effect with this new standard. So the issue is all communities in Connecticut are now facing this dilemma, and we have a whole...
Because it was a problem.
No, there's a whole bunch of reasons to go. We've got a whole other meeting on that one. But the issue ends up being that we need to move together purposefully and make sure that we provide opportunities for the community to be involved and engaged in this process as we...
I'm not sure I get your point. Is your point that we have to be careful about getting too many people involved because we're on a timeline? I'm confused.
No, well, if I may, I think he was just simply saying there's not a lot we can do or change right now, like in terms of advertising. We can't get an advertising budget for this between now and July 1st. So he's simply saying we're at the end of this process, and for this time go-around, this is the process that's left.
We did a lot of stuff, as Alan indicated. We created an email flyer for all of our public events in the attempts to get them to go viral. But the issue is public policy isn't always the most engaging aspect. So we weren't successful in getting them to go viral. So our goal was not to spam people with public policy either. The issue was to inform and educate so that people can be involved and engaged. So it's a delicate balance, and I think we're trying to find that balance. And I think if there's ways that you can let people know that the plan's available on the city's website, we'd really appreciate that effort. If there aren't any other public comments, let me just say, first of all, I got 7 pages worth of great stuff, some great observations. One of the things I tell the Commission on a regular basis is the challenge working on a process like this is that you get so close to it sometimes, you're not able to put it in perspective. And I think your comments and observations today really started to focus in on some things that can help make the city a better place, and that's awesome feedback. So thank you very much for all your comments today, your help. We'll be working with the Commission moving forward. We're going to, in March, refine the plan, probably by the beginning of April or so, for about another 5 or 6 weeks out. We have to have pulled the trigger, because as Alan indicated earlier in the meeting, there is a 65-day comment period that it goes to the Council, to the Regional Planning Agency, and other opportunities for people to weigh in. And there will be a formal public hearing for adoption. And hopefully, if you could keep that on your radar screens and let other people know about that, we'd appreciate that as well. So if there's nothing else, thank you very much for your input today, and please stay involved. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.